Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with the domain. The domain is all of your x values. So take your graph and shade from the graph to the x-axis. Now, the only other thing that you have to think about with this is these arrows tell us I go in both directions this way. So that tells us for this one that the domain goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. The next thing we're going to go ahead and look at is the range. The range is all of the values for y. So for this one, again, now I'm going from the graph to the y-axis. So here I'm going like this. Now, this does stop here, but you see this arrow on this side? Well, the arrow on this side keeps going, the graph going down, and the arrow on this side keeps the graph going up. So the range for this is the same as the domain. It goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. All right, so the next thing we're looking for are the X-intercepts and the Y-intercepts. Now, the thing about the X-intercept, you will always have a value for X and your Y is 0. In the Y-intercept, you will always have a value for Y and your X is 0. So that is here, 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 and here. Those are the points where the graph touches the x-axis. I'm going to go ahead and label all of these values just to make sure I have all of them correctly. This is going to be 1, 2, and 3. So that first x-intercept there is going to happen at 3, 0. This looks like it's -1, and over here this point is -2. So let's call that halfway in the middle. So that next x-intercept is going to be negative 1.5 and 0. In the last one, this would be -3, and finally -4. So that last x-intercept will be at -4, 0. The last value we're going to go ahead and look at is the y-intercept, which is right there. It's where it crosses the y-axis. So if I go through and label that, that's going to be -1, -2, -3, -4. So that happens at -5. So the y-intercept has a 0 value for x and -5 for y. All right, so again, we're going to go ahead and start with the domain. The domain is what values the function has for x. So I'm going to go ahead and shade so we can go through and take a look at this. Now, what I'm seeing here is I need to make sure I label all of this correctly to make sure I have my numbers. So down here, that value of x is going to be -5. And it goes all the way to -2. Both of those numbers are included, so I put both of them in brackets. Now, I have another part of this function, so I want to union that with the next part. Now here, this starting value is at 0, but that 0 is not included, so I put that in parentheses. This arrow going in this direction means the graph will keep extending, so that goes to positive infinity. So remember, domain are just all possible x values that you can go ahead and graph. The next one we're going to go ahead and look at is the range. Now for the range, I am doing all possible y. So I'm going to the graph to the y-axis. Just keeping in mind that whenever you have an arrow, this keeps going in that direction. So for the range, remember, always start from the smallest to the largest. which in this case means going from the bottom up. So from the bottom, if I'm starting at the bottom, that goes towards negative infinity. Now, the interesting part about my range here is if I look at this, I'm going from here to here, and there is a gap between here and here. And because there's none of this piece that is filled in for that range, I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. That's going to be an open circle. So that goes all the way up to -2. And again, because there's a gap, I have to connect those. I do that with the U for the union symbol. And the value here for Y that... Now I'm going to go ahead and label this point. This point right here is -5, 0. And again, for the range, we are looking for the Y value. That's a filled in circle. So that will go ahead and now go from 0. Again, the Y values. And this point here looks like it is -2, 3. So we'll go all the way up to 3 and including 3. Because it is including both of those, I need to make sure that I have my square brackets on both sides. The reason that 2 gets a parentheses is because this is an open circle around the -2. Now, we already did the X-intercept. We did the X-intercept when I labeled this point right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that one down. The X-intercept is -5, 0. And that is the only place on the x-axis where the graph touches. If I look at the y-axis, the graph actually never touches the y-axis. I have an open circle here, but that doesn't count. So the y-intercept here is none.